His face screwed up a look of dawning comprehension in his piggy eyes. "I've heard that name. That was the one who murdered my parents, yes," Harry said. "But he's gone," said Uncle Vernon impatiently, without the slightest sign that the murder of Harry's parents might be a painful topic to anybody. "That giant bloke said so. He's gone." "He's back," said Harry heavily. It felt very strange to be standing here in Aunt Petunia's surgically clean kitchen, beside the top-of-the-range fridge and the widescreen television, and talking calmly of Lord Voldemort to Uncle Vernon. The arrival of the Dementors and Little Whinging seemed to have caused a breach in the great invisible wall that divided the relentlessly non-magical world of Privet Drive and the world beyond. Harry's two lives had somehow become fused, and everything that had been turned upside down. The Dursleys were asking for details about the magical world, and Mrs. Figg knew Albus Dumbledore. Dementors were soaring around Little Whinging, and he might never go back to Hogwarts. Harry's head throbbed more painfully. "Back?" whispered Aunt Petunia. She was looking at Harry as she had never looked at him before, and all of a sudden, for the very first time in his life, Harry fully appreciated that Aunt Petunia was his mother's sister. He could not have said why this hit him so very powerfully at this moment. All he knew was that he was not the only person in the room who had an inkling of what Lord Voldemort being back might mean. Aunt Petunia had never in her life looked at him like that before. Her large, pale eyes, so unlike her sister's, were not narrowed in dislike or anger. They were wide and fearful. The furious pretense that Aunt Petunia had maintained all Harry's life, that there was no magic and no world other than the world she inhabited with Uncle Vernon, seemed to have fallen away. "Yes," Harry said, talking directly to Aunt Petunia now. "He came back a month ago. I saw him." Her hands found Dudley's massive leather-clad shoulders and clutched them. That is a passage from Order of the Phoenix, written by J.K. Rowling, or Rowling, however you want to pronounce it. So hi guys, how are you today? I wanted to do kind of a character study today on Aunt Petunia and Severus Snape. I have kind of a little idea, little theory in my mind that they are so very different, but so very much the same. And I have my reasons that I have written down in my Deathly Hallows notebook. I love it so much. But basically, I hypothesize that though Aunt Petunia and Severus Snape spent their entire lives disliking each other vehemently, they are the same character. And I have many, many bullet points to read from this, and I have many passages to back up my claims in both Deathly Hallows and Order of the Phoenix here. Nice splodge. But basically I want to start going through this. So, if we look at both characters, we can see that both Aunt Petunia and Snape were estranged from Lily Evans Potter. Both of them hated Harry Potter to the point where they were downright abusive and vile to him, but they both protected Harry out of love for Lily. So these three things are what ties them together the most. And we have multiple examples of this. First of all, the big one is Snape died in order to see Harry be successful in his defeat of Lord Voldemort. Snape helped Harry with occlumency, and he was not kind, but he was a very passionate teacher. When Harry was learning occlumency, Snape very, very strongly wanted to teach Harry. You know, in potions, I don't think Snape had any passion to really teach Harry how to make a good potion. It was his job, and his passion was always in defense against the dark arts over potions, even though he excelled at potions. But there was true purpose for Severus Snape to be teaching Harry Potter occlumency. And you can see that very, very clearly in a lot of the lessons that he gives Harry. For example, when Harry is being attacked, kind of, when Snape is going into his mind, there is a part where Harry sees his parents in the Mirror of Erised. A great black dragon was rearing in front of him. His father and mother were waving at him out of an enchanted mirror. Cedric Diggory was lying on the ground with blank eyes staring at him. So we skip a little bit, and then Snape says, get up, you are not trying, you are making no effort, you are allowing me access to memories you fear, handing me weapons. I told you to empty yourself of emotion. Fools who wear their hearts proudly on their sleeves, who cannot control their emotions, who wallow in sad memories and allow themselves to be provoked this easily. Weak people, in other words, they stand no chance against his powers. He will penetrate your mind with absurd ease, Potter. I find this passage to be very interesting also, because when Snape sees Lily for the first time in Harry's memories, I don't think he was expecting it, because Harry was a baby when Lily died, and Snape, I don't think, knew about the Mirror of Erised, or, well, Harry finding the Mirror of Erised, really. The whole Quirrell thing was pretty much the only connection I could see them having. It was in the room when Dumbledore and the teachers found Harry and rescued him. I don't know. He starts telling Harry how stupid it is to be emotionally invested and to wear your heart on your sleeve, because that's how you get hurt. And that's how he got hurt. So I found that very interesting. Snape obviously gave Harry the sword of Godric Gryffindor hi honey, in the woods. It is obviously Lily's Patronus that Snape has. And of course that's part of the whole helping Harry thing. Snape protected Harry from Quirrell for an entire year, and Snape was upset when Dumbledore told Snape that Harry must die. Now, this was partially for selfish reasons. You know, you have used me, he says, so the boy must die. And he goes, I've thought all these years that we were protecting him for her, for Lily. So he's still doing it not for Harry's benefit, but for Lily's benefit, but he's still protecting Harry. So that's all of the ways that Snape was serving Harry throughout Harry's schooling without Harry even really realizing it. And then we move on to Aunt Petunia, who is almost even more interesting, and it's so weird because she's like not even really in the stories that much. She's only ever in the beginning and sometimes the very, very end of the books. Petunia was in contact with Dumbledore to keep her nephew safe the entire time. And we know that because Dumbledore sends her a howler in Harry's 5th year that says, remember my last, Petunia, and he's referring to his last letter, which was the letter that he left with baby Harry on the front porch, saying, you know, giving her all of the details of what happened the night that her sister and brother-in-law were murdered, were killed. Petunia had knowledge of the wizarding world that she kept under wraps, but it led her into more of an understanding of Harry than Uncle Vernon ever could have. This led to her standing up to her beloved husband from keeping him from kicking Harry out of the house. For example, Harry's talking about Dementors, and Uncle Vernon goes, what the ruddy hell are Dementors? And Aunt Petunia goes, they guard the wizard prison Azkaban. And Harry goes, how do you know that? He asked her, astonished. Aunt Petunia looked quite appalled with herself. She glanced at Uncle Vernon in fearful apology, then lowered her hand slightly to reveal her horsey teeth. I heard that awful boy telling her about them years ago, she said jerkily. If you mean my mom and dad, why don't you use their names, said Harry loudly, but Aunt Petunia ignored him. She seemed horribly flustered. Here it says that except for one outburst years ago, in the course of which Aunt Petunia had screamed that Harry's mother had been a freak, he had never heard her mention her sister. He was astounded that she had remembered this scrap of information about the magical world for so long, when she usually put all her energies into pretending it didn't exist. So she knows a lot more than she leads on, because she is fearful and jealous and bitter about the whole wizarding world, but she knows those true dangers out there, and she knows much more than she leads on in order to protect, that's my cat, in order to protect Harry, and she understands much more than Vernon ever could, and that's why Vernon has no relationship with Harry, whereas Aunt Petunia, even though very, very shallow, has somewhat of a relationship with him. When Uncle Vernon decides it's time for Harry to go, Aunt Petunia gets the howler from Dumbledore that says, "Remember my last, Petunia." And she tells her husband, "The boy will have to stay, Vernon." He stays. If we throw him out, the neighbors will talk. That's how she tricks them. They'll ask awkward questions. They'll want to know where he's gone. We'll have to keep him. She tells Harry, "You're to stay in your room. You're not to leave the house. Now get to bed." And that's kind of where the chapter ends, with Harry arguing with his aunt about, you know, who is that howler from, blah, 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 blah. Aunt Petunia knows much more than she leads on. And so this kind of leads me into my questions about Aunt Petunia. So she knows if she kicks Harry out of the house, if she does what Vernon suggests, she knows the dangers that are out there for him. She knows that there is a mass murderer hunting him, trying to kill him, and she knows that that mass murderer is the murderer who slaughtered her sister. So I wonder, is it possible that Petunia was partially, and I'm sure that a lot of it was still Aunt Petunia's bitter and jealous and likes everything to be normal and neat, but I'm wondering if there's just a little tiny part of Aunt Petunia that is so against Harry knowing about the wizarding world and going to Hogwarts because she knows how dangerous it is and feared her nephew being slaughtered by Voldemort just as her sister was. Just like a tiny, tiny part of her that was like, if we keep him here and he's like as normal as possible, then he's safer and then if he goes into that world. I don't know. I also wonder, and I want to know so badly, how Petunia reacted the morning that she found Harry on the front step, because obviously Uncle Vernon would probably not be so thrilled and would probably not give a rip that Aunt Petunia's sister and brother-in-law died, but that was her sister. So I feel like at least a small part of her, when she read the letter and was holding baby Harry, felt some sort of sadness and maybe a little bit of comfort holding her nephew, or did she not? And did she hate him? And did she want no part of him because he was a reminder of what happened? Which leads me into my next point. But I really, really want to know, what was Aunt Petunia's reaction that morning? Like, how did she really feel? For Snape and Petunia, Harry represented loss and guilt over what they had done to Lily. He was a daily reminder. For Snape, he was a daily reminder of James, for sure, who Snape hated, but he also was a daily reminder of Lily. And although that might have been comforting to Snape in a way, it was also probably horrible for him, because every time he stared into those eyes, he was reminded of what he lost, and he was reminded of the fact that it was his fault that he lost it in multiple ways, because he lost the friendship first, and then he was kind of the reason that they died. For Aunt Petunia, was it the same? Because she wrote her sister completely off for years. Like, Lily would probably come home for the summer and they probably wouldn't really talk. And we know that she called her sister a freak all the time and alienated her and hated her best friend, who was there for at least a few years, Snape. And we know that she hated her husband once Lily and James got married and didn't care about Harry once Harry was born. But as Harry's growing up, I'm sure that she saw in Harry's eyes that they were her sister's eyes, and was it a daily reminder for her that, she had written her sister completely off, and when her sister died thinking that Petunia hated her, or that, she died just not knowing that Petunia did love her in some way? I don't know. It's all speculation with Petunia. But it is very fascinating. I would love to have the answers to it. But as wonderful as it can be to kind of think about how Snape and Petunia may have while they did, they protected Harry, and they may have loved him in the sense that they felt the duty to protect him for the love of someone else. They also were very selfish, and they were also very abusive, and we can't deny that. Snape was a very terrible human being. He was a very terrible teacher. He was mean to all of Harry's friends and his entire class. And Petunia was downright abusive and neglectful, basically. They didn't feed him. They kept him under the stairs. Like, they didn't buy him clothes. It was horrible. But they also left Harry selfishly. For Snape, the last thing that we know from Severus Snape is that he left Harry desiring Lily's gaze. When the flask was full to the brim and Snape looked as though there was no blood left in him, his grip on Harry's robe slackened. "Look at me," he whispered. The green eyes found the black, but after a second, something in the depths of the dark pair seemed to vanish, leaving them fixed, blank and empty. The hand holding Harry thudded to the floor, and Snape moved no more. So he was just selfishly asking for one last gaze from his estranged friend, which is nice and sad and bittersweet and romantic, but at the same time, it was a selfish move. Now we have Aunt Petunia. Her last interaction with Harry. Aunt Petunia, whose face had been buried in her handkerchief, looked around at the sound. She did not seem to have expected to find herself alone with Harry. Hastily stowing her wet handkerchief into her pocket, she said, "Well, goodbye," and marched toward the door without looking at him. "Goodbye," said Harry. She stopped and looked back. For a moment, Harry had the strangest feeling that she wanted to say something to him. She gave him an odd, tremulous look and seemed to teeter on the edge of speech. But then, with a little jerk of her head, she bustled out of the room after her husband and son. So we know that Petunia almost gave in to the little tiny part of her that loved her sister and cared for her nephew, or at least cared for him in the sense that she cared for her sister's child and all she had left of her sister. But her pride got in the way. And that's a very, very selfish way to leave Harry and say goodbye to him. In conclusion, I think Aunt Petunia and Severus Snape, they loathed each other as children, and as adults, if they had met each other, they would have probably loathed each other when they reunited as well. They disliked each other probably until the end. I mean, Aunt Petunia said that awful boy, and she was speaking of Severus Snape, and she was an adult in that passage. So their whole lives, they loathed each other. But it is my opinion that they are very much the same character. They're a very similarly written character. Just because they have similar motives and similar ways of carrying out their actions, and they have similar conclusions as well. So if you guys enjoyed this character analysis, this character study, please leave a like and possibly subscribe. Leave me a comment on what you think, what your opinions are. Do you like Severus Snape, or do you hate him? Are you in the middle? I am in the middle. I see him objectively as a human with faults. He's a character with faults. That's how I see him. And maybe someday I'll do just a study on him alone. But I would really love to hear your guys' opinions on Snape and Aunt Petunia. I really want to hear you guys' opinions on Aunt Petunia if you have them. If you have any other characters that you want me to go into, or any other character comparisons that you want me to go into, let me know. I read passages from both Deathly Hallows today and Order of the Phoenix, both written by J.K. Rowling. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I have work tonight, so I gotta go put on a bunch of layers of clothing and somehow stay warm because it's freezing here. Okay, alright everybody, bye, and stay happy.